Sagt der Heilige Mishnah. Sagt der Heilige Mishnah. Echad dine mominus, ve'echad dine nefashis are both handled in the same way. They're adjudicated the same way. B'drisha u'b'chakira. So if you remember, we learned a couple of days ago what drisha and chakira is. Drisha is making sure that the important parts of their testimony correspond to each other, like the timing and the amounts of money and so on and so forth. And chakiris was what color were his clothing. Let me see if we could find that actual Rashi that talks about it. Over here it is. B'bedikas she'enoi misheva chakiris be'ziyoyim be'zeshah. Aval b'kelev shcharin b'kelev levonim she'ein din azama tluy b'hem. So that's b'dikos. So b'dikos are the general questions like what color his clothing were, where if they contradict each other, it's not that problematic. But chakiris are what time was it, and these types of questions that are the details that allow an aid to be muzam. So our Mishnah tells us that by dina moments and by dina nefashis, we require both derishas and chakiris. Shenemar mishpat echad yilachem. There's a pasuk that tells us that all types of judgments, all types of cases, are adjudicated in the same way. Mishpat echad yilachem. And we know about drishas and chakiris because of a shaftu ha'eda v'yitzilu ha'eda. That's how we know it by nefashis, and because this is mishpat echad yilachem, we know that should apply equally to dina moments. Ma bein dina mominus or dina nefashis. So, what are the differences between how dina mominus and dina nefashis are adjudicated? Dr. Gemara, dina mominus b'shloisha. Dina mominus, you have 3 dayanim. The dina nefashis be'esher b'shloisha, you require 23 dayanim. Another difference. Dina mominus poischen bein l'schus bein l'chayva. When the dayanim start to deliberate, and just to clarify what a bezdin looks like, in a typical secular court, if there's someone being tried for a crime, first the prosecutor makes his opening statement to the jury, and then the defendant lawyer makes his opening statement to the jury. Then they call the witnesses, then they're crossed. But by a bezdin, there was no lawyers, and there's no opening statements. Bezdin starts right with the Eidim, and they interview the Eidim. Then they discuss amongst themselves what exactly they're going to do. So when it comes to dina mominus, they can discuss they can get into their arguments any way they want. But the dina nefashis, the very first comment that the bezdin raise have to be positive towards the defendant, something that leans to exonerating him. So that's the second distinction between dina mominus and dina nefashis. And then there's a third one. Dina mominus matan al pei echad. A majority of even one dayan carries the day. Bein l'schus, bein l'chayva. But dina nefashis matan al pei echad l'schus. Out of 23, if 12 out of 23 are mezaka, and 11 out of 23 are mechayiv, we go basa the roiv, a simple roiv of one dayan. But if they condemn him, it would need to be al pishnaim l'chayv. And the Gemara asked already, we learned this at the beginning of the Masechta, the Gemara asked, if you have 23 dayanim, then it's impossible to have a roiv of 2. It would have to be a roiv of 3. It would have to be 10 to 13. So the Gemara says, when could you have a roiv of 2? If one of the dayanim didn't have an opinion, and because of that, they had to add 2 dayanim, and that made it into a even bezdin, that's where you can have a roiv of 2. So that is the third distinction. The fourth distinction is dina mominus machzir.
One at a time?
I'm sorry? No, 2 at a time. Yeah. Dina mominus machzirin. Yeah, but the one that didn't have an opinion is out. So it's even. Dina mominus machzirin bein l'schus bein l'chayva. Even after the case closed, should new evidence be introduced, they'll open up the case. Bein l'schus bein l'chayva. Dina nefashis machzirin l'schus ve'ein machzirin l'chayva. You'll only open up the case again if you could find a way to exonerate him. There's not a lot of time, because usually you go straight from the bezdin to do the einish, to do the misa, because you don't want to be ma'an the din. But nevertheless, up until the time they carry out the death sentence, they could still find a schus for him, but they don't bring in any edus l'chayva or rayas l'chayva after he was already exonerated. That's the fourth difference. The fifth difference is anybody in the audience, a Talmud, a spectator, anybody can throw out a svara l'schus or l'chayv. But dini nefosh is hakoyim alamdim schus, but ve'ein hakoyim alamdim chayv. If someone from the audience or spectator calls out some tanya that would hurt the accused, we don't listen to him. That's the fifth difference. Sixth difference. Right. Yeah, tell me the Rashi is telling me. Dina Mominis Hamalamed Choiva, Malamed Schus, Vamalamed Schus, Malamed Choiva. Anybody who's Malamed Schus can be Malamed Choiv and vice versa. But Dina Nefashis Hamalamed Choiva, Malamed Schus, Avalamed Schus, Ein Yochalach Malamed Choiva. So Nachamal. By Dina Mominis, if in the deliberations one dying takes the position to be Malamed Choiv, he could change the Schus. And vice versa, if he took the initial position to be Melamed Schus, he can change the Chayva. But in dealing with Fashis, once a dying, his initial position is Schus, we will not let him change his position to Chayva. So dealing with Fashis, Melamed Chayva, Melamed Schus. If his initial position was Chayva, and then he decides he wants to change his mind, we'll let him change his mind and reconsider to go to Chayv. Of course, this is before the actual vote. Aval Melamed Schus, once you're starting off thinking schus, we don't let him go back. Ein yochalachser ulalamed choiva. As Rashi says, svaru to svara. The be'inon v'hitzilu. You're always trying to save him. The Gemara Mukamla, the Gemara is going to explain that when is this case? B'shas masa humatan hudula yachzer. While they're deliberating, if he took an initial position to exonerate this accused, he can't take the other position. The mitayich shata oimeloi shaloi lachzer. Because if you tell him that you can't change your mind, even though now he's thinking yes to change his mind, but being that he's stuck in the position that he initially took, it will force him to try to justify that position. And his original thought to exonerate this fellow might not have been valid, and that's why he's changing his mind. But if he's forced into that position, so then he'll try to find a legitimate reason why this person should be exonerated. But b'shas gmar din, but b'shas gmar din, where he's already voted, and then he realizes that he might be wrong. Then he can even because he's already tried to find any possible thing to be mizaka the guy, and he couldn't find. I just want to bring up. So we're at six. We're at six distinctions. Let's learn the seventh distinction. You have to start it entire by day, but you can continue on to the night. But everything has to be done by day. I think that's already that's the sixth distinction. The seventh distinction is Dina Mominus Gorim by B'yoim Ben L'Schus Ben L'Chayva. Dina Mominus, you can finish the whole trial in a one-day trial, no matter what the verdict is. But Dina Nefashis Gorim by B'yoim L'Schus V'yoim Shala'acharav L'Chayva. If we're exonerating him, they can paskin the same day. But if they want to be mechayiv him, they force him to wait overnight. Lefichach, therefore, ain't done in Leiber of Shabbos, because if they waited overnight, the next day would be Shabbos, where they couldn't paskin because you're not allowed to kill a guy on Shabbos. So you're not allowed to carry out a death sentence on Shabbos, so there would be Inu Yadin. So therefore, you can't leave it so that the second day should be Shabbos for Leiber of Yom Tov. Okay, so that's, I think we're already at 7 distinctions. And now the final one is Dinim Ominous, Hatameis V'Taharis, L'Gabi Tumatayra, Maschilin Min Agodol. You can even ask the greatest of the Dayonim to speak first, and even though nobody will argue with him. But Dinim Nefashis, we don't want the biggest guy to start first, because if he hears L'Choiv, no one's going to express opinion L'Schus. So therefore, Maschilin Min Atzad, you start from the small guys.
No one is allowed to?
I don't know. Let's look at Rashi. Rashi says, "Shoylam chil legadol shuvdiyanim ma'oim v'davar but min atzad v'naktanim shema yechayvenu agadol v'lo yirtzu lachlek al devorov mishum lo yisan al riv al devorov shel gadol." Rav tiv v'lo yud. So it's lo yirtzu but machmas the pasuk. Zok to Gemara. And I think now we're at the 8th distinction. Dina maminis hakol ksherin ledina maminis. Anyone can pass dina maminis, even not mamazer. The Eina Kol Ksherin Lodin Lodin Nefashis Elakehanim Levim VYisraelim Hamasim L'Kuna. and the Yisrael who's ready to marry Lakuna only mishpachas miyuchasos. So I have a simple question. By an accused, Lamisa, there's exonerating him and there's mechayiv him. But by dinam ominous, if you're mechayiv one guy, you automatically be mizaka the other guy. If you mizaka one guy, you automatically mechayiv the other guy. So how does that work? L'schus, l'choiv, every schus is a choiv for the other party. Unless there's a case of dinam ominous where like the neknosis, for instance, or it's a shayla if he has to pay, but it's still it's really about him, but there's still a baldin. So I think if it's like a question of borrowing money, so I say you borrowed money from me, you say you didn't, so then you're directly hurting one guy if you're helping the other guy. So this is probably more negaya to a din knosos where it's a new chiyuv, that there's a new chiyuv that's not because I took money from you, that's being mechayiv me to pay you. That's what I'm assuming it's talking about. Otherwise, it's a little bit difficult to understand schus and choiv, because everything is schus for one and choiv for the other. Okay, can we that too? Yeah, okay. Zok the Heilige Gemara. Dinim ominous, mi ba'inin drisha v'chakira. Are you telling me, because that's what our mission seems to say, that by dinim ominous need drisha v'chakira? Is that so? We're meaning we have a brisa that clearly says you don't have to make drisha v'chakira, because the brisa says shtar shezman le'kosov ba'echad b'nisan b'shmita. A shtar that says Reuven borrowed $100,000 on Rosh Chodesh Nisan of a Shemitah year. Ubo, we're going to soon see what's the relevance, the significance of the fact that it was a Shemitah year. Ubo Eidim Vamru, and Eidim came along and said, how can you say Eidim in this shtar that on Echad B'Nisan you witnessed alone occur? Pliny on that day, Imanu Hayisem b'Makom Pliny. You were with us in a different city. You could not have possibly been at this location witnessing alone. So you would think you throw the whole thing out. But no, Zok the Brisa. Shtar kosher v'ediv ksherin. It's not relevant that they were off by a day. You know why? Because you don't have to be so careful. Chashinan shema ichru v'chesvu. Maybe this event and the loan occurred the day before. Where chashi, they just post-dated the shtar. Now, correct the Gemara, which means times and dates are very, very relevant. Well, then this is a pasal l'shtar. Elamai, we don't pay so much attention in Dinei Mominus to the exact dates. And the main significance, like we said earlier, of the chakiras are things, information that allows you to be masim deitim. Here we see clearly that even important things like dates and places, which are information that you need to be masim deitim, even that you ignore. So you have a chloride from the brisa that we don't make Durisha v'chakira. So Zok Gemara, Heichi Chayshinon Shema Ichru v'chesvu. If you only need Durisha v'chakira, then everything has to line up. Yet the brisa says clearly it doesn't have to line up, and we're still matter the star, even though times and dates might not have lined up. Zok Gemara, you have a good kasha, but why would you ask a kasha from an obscure brisa if you can ask a kasha from a famous Mishnah? Ask the same kasha from a Mishnah, because from a Mishnah we can prove as well that for Dinei Mominus you don't need Drisha v'chakira. And this is a very famous Mishnah. We've learned it many times. A predated star is possible because it's allowing the Malva to collect from the Kuchais in. But if it's a post-dated star, the Malva just gave up his right to collect from the Kuchais, even though he should have been entitled from the time of the loan. If you hold in Dusha v'chakira, which means times and dates and places are very relevant, because you need to be able to be ma'asam edim. Why should a star that's post-dated be kosher? If we want to be ma'asam him, he'll always be able to say, no, the star was post-dated. So this is also a raya, you don't need Dusha v'chakira. So why did you ask a kasha on our Mishnah from a brisa? Why didn't you ask a kasha on our Mishnah from this Mishnah? That's not fair. Why the Amoyer decided to ask from a brisa? The kasha from the brisa is a much starker kasha. Why is that? When you post-date something to Echad B'Nisan, that's a very bad day. You know why? Because we know that Shemitah is Mishamer at the end of the year. So people aren't so eager to give loans in the Shemitah year, especially towards the end, where if it bypasses the end of the year, it'll be mishamet, and he won't be able to collect it back. So when you have a star that's dated very close to the end of a Shemitah year, on its face, it's already suspect because it's not likely that such a loan would have occurred. So Zok Gemara, that's why it's a much bigger kasha from the Brisa. The adifim mina kaminan, the afilu echad benisa de Shemitah, the loy shlichi inshi demas de muspi. People aren't generally going to loan there. So the date of that's ma'ucher, the date that's ma'ucher to the first day of Nisan and Shemitah is suspect on its face. So that's more of a reason why you should reject the star. It's not mistaber to say that they post-dated it. Who's going to want to put himself into a scenario where he might not be able to collect? But since the Maisa, the star is valid, and he still has 6 months to be able to collect, Machsharinon, we say it's a kosher star. So you clearly see, even when all the factors are pointing to the fact that it's not a kosher star, you still say we don't care about the dates. So you have a klor raya, you don't care about the dates, a much starker raya than from the Mishnah. So at the end of the day, we have a stira. Our Mishnah says you make drishas and chakiras for dinim ominous, and the Bryce in the Mishnah says that we don't make drishas and chakiras for dinim ominous. So the Gemara is going to now offer 3 terutzim. Simin, Charpash, which are the first letters of the Amayroyim that weigh in on this subject. Amar Rab Chanina, so that's the Ches. Dvar Torah, Echadin Amominus, Vechadin Nefashis, B'drusha V'chakira. Really, the pasuk says that there is no distinction between Din Amominus and Din Nefashis, and they both need Drusha V'chakira. Shenemar Mishpat Echad Yilachem. Tumatam Omru, Din Amominus Loiba, Inin Drusha V'chakira. Why did Chazal make a takana? So now we just learned that the fact that those brises say you don't need Drusha V'chakira is a takana d'Rabbanan. Why would they make such a takana? Imagine I want to lend somebody $100,000, and I think to myself, if I want to collect from him and he denies a loan, I'll need to bring Adim. Now, if they're going to start interrogating my Adim and intimidating my Adim and driving them crazy, my Adim might trip up and not stand, and then I'm not going to be able to collect. So forget it. I'm not interested. So they wanted to make it easy for a Malva to be able to bring Adim, so that he'll be more eager to lend because he feels more reassured he'll get paid back. Zok Gemara, if that's the reason, so then we know there's halacha that if dayanim make a mistake, they have to pull the money out of their own pocket and pay. Right? We learned a couple of days ago that what if 2 dayanim were mechayev? One was part of the question: do they pay his chelik? Do they pay his chelik? Do he pay their chelik? But dayanim have to pay. But how's that fair? You don't let the dayanim analyze and interrogate the edim, and if there's a mistake, they're responsible. You're making them paskin with their hands tied behind their backs. El mayata, turning on Tamid Beis. Told. Lo yishamu. We know told they do pay, but based on this logic, they shouldn't have to pay because they're not they can't paskin. You can't hold them responsible for something. Told Bezdin Zakrashi, but in the moment lo yishamu, they shouldn't have to pay because they can tell you, if you would have let me drill down on the Edom, I would have uncovered this. The Dilma Ishavkas Lidrosh Velachar have a Rafchalamils of Lavatono. They would have uncovered this fraud or whatever it is that they made a mistake about. Zok Gemara, the reason why we make them pay is also part of the Takana D'Rabbanan. Kol Shekain Shetin Al Delos B'Snei Lovin. If we totally indemnify the Dayanim from a mistake, then they're going to always side with the underdog, with the loiva, and then they sure won't be able to collect. So therefore, yes, we put the dayanim into a very difficult position, and it probably kills them because their mamish stuck. That's why it's called a dayan, because he's dying, because he's mamish forced to paskin, and he doesn't even have the right to interrogate it. Gewaltig. So Zog to Gemara, now we have a teretz. What's the teretz of Chanina? The Mishnah that says, our Mishnah that says that you have to make Drusha V'Chakiris B'Dinim Ominus, that's speaking before the Takana. The Brises that say you don't have to make Drusha V'Chakiris are speaking after the Takana. Rav Amar, both of the Mishnayos are speaking after the Takana. So if it's after the Takana, the Brises we understand. But why in the Mishnah do you have to make Drusha V'Chakiris? They already made a Takana. Rav Amar Masnisin Da'acha B'Dinei Knosais. It's speaking about in the Knossos. What's the whole reason why they made it a Takana? So a Malva should be willing to lend. But in the Knossos, there's no Malva here. The only place where they relax the interrogation of the Eidim is by a Malva and a Loiva. The Idich by Dois Valvois, the Brises that say that you don't make Drusha v'Chakiris is speaking by loans. By loans, they relax the requirement of Eidim. But any other Dinah moment, such as Knossos, there's no Svarsh, and there's no Takana, and there you need a proper Drusha v'Chakir. Okay, that's a second teretz. And Rav Papa, so it was Charpash, so Chanina, Rava, now Rav Papa, Amar Idi v'Idi b'Haidav Alva. Our Mishnah is also speaking by Dov Alva. So Aibazoi, why don't you have to make Drisha v'Chiris? Zaktamora kan bedin meruma. Here is Rashi says either the Dayanim know this Malva, they know this Baldin, and they know that he's not such an honest guy. So they know that any case that he brings, they have to look into a little bit more carefully. That's number one. Number two, Rashi, there might be a case where the Baldin is a regular guy. They're not choshing him. But from the arguments, something doesn't smell right. So they have the need to drill down further. So our Mishnah that says they make Drusha v'Chiris even after the Takana, even by a Malva, is Bedin Meruma when something doesn't smell right. Kan bin Shein Meruma. But in a standard case, you don't make Drusha v'Chiris. Which now answers what we said earlier. Toili Shamu, Koshkish Delos. The teretz is if they see something funny, Avada they have the right to drill down. But if everything's normal, they don't have the right to drill down. Where do you see this distinction between a din meruma and not din meruma? So now we have three terutzim, and Mikano Lahaba is not going to introduce a new teretz in our Mishnah because we have three terutzim. But we're going to get into a little bit of a different shaila. Kiddush Lakish, he's the one who introduced to us this concept of the difference between how you adjudicate a din meruma, where there's suspect, versus a standard din Torah. Rish Lakish Rami, Ksib tzedek tishbar amisecha. There's one tzedek, so normal psak halacha. But then it's ksiv tzedek tirdoy, meaning double tzedek, meaning you got to drill down. So it's mashma in one pasuk that they're just a general, typical adjudication, and the other pasuk is mashma that you're really drilling down. Okay, tzad kan bedin meruma, kan bedin shein meruma. So Rish Lakish says you see in the psukim gufa that sometimes you could just paskin in a standard fashion, and sometimes they really have to interrogate and examine because if something doesn't smell right, they need to uncover the problem. Ravashi Omar, Ravashi says, that's Ravashi. That's right. Right, that's four. That's right. Ravashi is the shin. Masnizim kedushanin. I'm not adding another teretz. There's already three terutzim on the Mishnah, and let's review them. Kodim gzeira, acha gzeira, right? Or milva versus knas, or meruma versus not meruma. But kroi, the psukim I'm going to emphasize. Why does it say tzedek tirdoif? Not like Rish Lakish because it's a din meruma. Rather, the two tzedeks are echad l'din ve'echad l'pshara. Not only when they paskin does it have to be 100% even and just. Even when they're making a pshara, it has to be even and just. It can't be leaning on one side over the other. And the Gemara is going to give an example of a case of pshara where they have to make sure that the pshara that they offer is also very, very even and just. Tanya. I was thinking the same thing. Tzedek tirdoy. Echad ledin ve'echad l'pshara. Ketzad. What's an example of a pshara that has to be just? Shtei sefinois oyrois b'nahar. There are two ships coming opposite each other in a very narrow channel. And if they veer too far off on either side, their hulls will get destroyed by the rocks. Upagu zebozeh. They're facing each other. Im oyrois shteyen, if they both try to squeeze in between the two rocks, shteyen toivos. They're both going to sink or they're both going to be ruptured. But if they go one at a time, shteyen oyrois, they'll make it fine. So the question is, who's got to back up until the channel is wide enough for the other boat to pass? They were on a very, very narrow pass. So they were walking along the slope of a mountain, which is very narrow, and on either side there's a terrible fall. And there's only place for one to pass, and they come and encounter each other. If they try both to go at the same time, they're both going to tumble down the mountain. So how is the just way to adjudicate this? I'm not sure how they got to a die in the middle of a mountain pass, but kasha v'maisa. If one was fully loaded, If one was fully loaded and one was empty. So if you're empty, you're light, you're movable, you can get around fast. So the halacha is tidcha she'eina tuna b'nei te'um. The loaded ship, the loaded donkey, he will get the right of way. Kroiva v'she'eina kroiva. What if one is much closer to their home base, so it's easy for them to back up and find a place to park? Then tidcha kroiva b'nei she'eina kroiva. But what if you stay in kroivas, stay rechaykos? What do? So then hatel pshara beinein umalis charzulusu. You have to give one the right of way, and the one who gets the right of way will have to pay off the person who didn't get the right of way the value of them getting the right of way. So you see, even in a pshara, you have to find a way to make it as fair as possible. Zok the heilige gemara weiter. We have a brayta. Tanu rabbanan. Tzedek tirdoif. What does that mean? Holach acher bezdin yafe. Run to find a good bezdin. Like who? Acher Eliezer Lelud. He had a good bezdin. Acher Rabbi ben Zakkai lebror chayil. Run after Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai to the bezdin in bror chayil. Now the Gemara is going to tell us another interesting aside that's relevant to the city of bror chayil.
So just Yosy, just quickly, what makes a good based in? Is it favors the defendant, the plaintiff? Is it
no? It's the bezdin that you gave shalach manas to last year.
right?
No, it means it's a big Talmud Chacham, reliable. The Tvua Shar asks, I don't understand. Didn't we say that there's a bezdin in every city, and you're supposed to go to the bezdin in your city? What?
Right.
They're setting up Bati Dinim in every city. If now you're telling me to run to a bezdin Yafa,
Right.
We learned that the Malva can force the loiva to go to the local bezdin. So what is this all about? Go to bezdin.
Right.
The Tvua Shar suggests, for a standard din Torah, yeah, you go to a local bezdin. But what if it's a very big, complicated din Torah? Then there's merit in finding a dine that's very far away. Okay, Zok to Gemara. This is fascinating. In the old times, they used to torture the Eden and try to stop us from keeping the Torah. So two things that they outlawed was making a bris was outlawed, and marriage. A simchas nisun was outlawed. So when they had to make a bris and they had to publicize it, you couldn't hang up a sign in shul. I'm being my idea, everybody. I'm making a bris. Couldn't put it in a loop. So how did you do it? It had to be very cryptic messages, discrete messages. So what they would do is kol rechaim beborni. In Borni, if there was a loud grinding noise from the rechaim that was operating, that would be a message to the city that shavua haben. It's the week of the sun, meaning after a week is when the bris is done. It will be a sign that there's a bris. Now, Or Haner b'Bror Chayil, that's why this is relevant, because this is another story about the city of Bror Chayil, where Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was the dayan. So what if there's Or Haner b'Bror Chayil? So either by day they're talking about a ner, or there's a big fire somewhere. That's a sign, Mishta Sham, that's a sign that there's a chasna going on. Zokt Toishvis, some very fascinating things. Zokt Toishvis, Kol Rechaim b'Borni, Percha Kuntrish Shas Gzeres HaMachos Haya, Shagozru Shloilomo, well, Uraim Loitzi Koil. And because of that, for Kavu Simen Zeh, they made a simen though that they shouldn't chap. Okay? Now it says, over here I want to show you something else interesting. I'm sorry? You want me to go back to Chimash B'Yishalmi, the Chsubis, Gabe Gzeres Shagozru B'Yehuda, the Ka'amar, Ma Simen Haya, Koil, Migrois beborni. That's Mishtasham. Or Ner bebror chayil, it means there's a Shavua Haben. So they had different simonim, right? They used light for a bris. Pierce, Kol Migrois was Rechaim Shal Grusais, that would indicate a chasana. Okay, so he brings them to anyway, I want to look at the next one. Or Haner bebror chayil.
This one consus and consum. Noises again.
Okay, very good. Now look what it says over here. Also, Arner Ikolmemer Shagam Barishina Hayu Oisin Simonim Eloshem Simcha. Okay. Or Aner Beberchayil. Zok Toisvis. Mikano Hagu Lahadlik Ner Bemila. The minig that they light nearest, they always light a candle by I don't know by the bris, by the Suda, right? By the bris itself. I've never seen it by the bris itself. Seen it by the Suda. Why? Because if this or Aner Beberchayil, because it's a simon for a bris. Umashin Hagu Lifrois Hamapa ala Pesach. Why is the minig by a bris to hang a curtain on the door. If somebody had a public meal for people, he doesn't want people knocking on his door at all hours of the day or night. He wants people coming when the Suda is in business. If there was a curtain hung by the door, that was a sign that they're still serving the meal. And once that's taken away, they're not serving the meal anymore. There are those who say that's also one of the reasons why we have a lot of shmatas when it comes to a chasna. There's a dek tichel, there's a chuppah, there's some by the yeki sometimes all from this minig to have a shmata. What? Look at the chasnas, verschiedene Stückes. Okay, sagt die Gemara weiter. Okay, nicht der Chuzach zusammen. Wir sind auf dieser Seite, wir sind auf dieser Seite. Yeah, that's it. Sagt die Gemara weiter. That was a very interesting aside. Tamarabon, Tedek Tirdoif, Halech Acher Chachamim Liyeshiva. Go after Chachamim Liyeshiva, Rasha's Beis Havad, Shehem, Shesham, Bezdin Kavua. Kegoin Acher Rabbi Eliezer Lulud, Acher Rabbi Yochanan Zakai, Leberchayo, Acher Rabbi Yeshua Lepekian, Acher Rabbi Gamliel Leyavna, Acher Rabbi Kiva Lebnei Brak, and Bnei Brak in Rabbi Kiva's days is not where Bnei Brak is in our days. It was actually, I think, 6 kilometers to the east. This I know from the professor, Dr. Rabbi Henry Abramson. Acher Rabbi Masio L'Roimi, Acher Rabbi Chananya ben Trajan L'Sichni, Acher Rabbi Yosy L'Tzipuri, Acher Rabbi Yudah ben Beseira L'Netzivin, Acher Rabbi Shua L'Goyla, Acher Rabbi Levei Shorim, Acher Chacham L'Lishkas Agozes. This sounds like a list that every Mesifta would have of where to send the Bochum to yeshiva out of town. When they finish the Mesiftas, you have to go to very good yeshivas to learn. Zogt Gemara weiter. Dina Mamanis Poischin. So we said, by Dina Mamanis, you could start off looking at the factors that maybe are Mechayiv the fellow, or at the factors that are Mezak the fellow. But when it comes to Dina Nefoshes, the very first thing Bezdin has to bring up after they listen to the Edim that are condemning this guy is something, a factor that exonerates him. So, what exactly do they say to point in the direction of exoneration, of acquittal? This is what they tell the Edim. Who said you know what you're talking about? Which is really like intimidating the witness. So you're intimidating the witness. You know how to intimidate a witness. Why not? Intimidate the witness. It's a good thing to intimidate the witness. We're trying to save this guy. Did we not learn? You make a move from room, move to this courtroom, move to this waiting room. Why? So that they should get confused and they change their mind about saying Eidos. So you see, you're supposed to do that. There's a huge difference between active scare tactics and passive scare tactics. Midami, Hasam and Mela Kamitchu. They're not saying anything intimidating, they're just being matriach them. That could be allowed. But your mom is pushing them away. How could you do that? So therefore, Ula didn't like this pshat. Ella Omar Ula, I'll tell you what they do. They ask to the crowd, Yeshlach Edom Lazima. Maybe we can find Edom to be mazim, these Edom to exonerate the accused. So then you're starting off with the chayv against these Edom. So you're being nice to this guy, but bad to them. Right away, they're starting raising chayv against the Edom. We have a chayvasai. Who said by them bringing it up, it's hurting the Edom? Maybe not, because they didn't even paskin yet, right? They just heard the testimony and they're about to start deliberating. At that point, if Edi Azama came, you wouldn't kill these Edom. You only kill these Edom if they already paskin al piv. But Tanan ain't Edom zayim in erogin achi yigmar din. So if that's the case, what's the problem? It's not chayvasa shoseh. I'll tell you why I don't like it. Because it could lead to chayvasa shoseh. Hachamina. What if they call for Edom Zayman and the Edom Zayman don't come and they first wait until the psak happens and then they come and you invited them? So now the fact that you told the Baldin find Edom to be mazim them, you've really encouraged them to do a choiv to the first of Edom. So that's not appropriate. That's not what the Beis Din would do. So we're still searching. What does Beis Din say to begin the deliberations with the schus of the accused? Elamar Rabba Arminule, they tell him, Yesh loch edim lachishan. Maybe you have edim that could contradict these edim, and that would save you. And that's not lachavasay by the other edim, because there's no penalty to them if they're mukhash. Rav Kahana Amar Rav Kahana says they say something that sounds very dubious. Midivreichem, they tell the edim who just said a whole story about this. Rosh Merusha, who's Chayiv Misa, who's Machal Shabbos, but edim Basra. They say, you know what? Midivreichem, from what you're saying, Nizdaka Ploini. It sounds like he's innocent. Correct the Toisvis Chachmei Anglia, Ambod the Maisa, they're outright lying to his face. He just had testimony that's going to condemn them, and they're going to say, oh, looks from your testimony, Ke'ilu, he's going to be exonerated. It's a lie. Zogt, the Toisvis Chachmei Anglia, he brings it from Rabbi Yehuda Peraish. I don't even know what that is. No, not Peraish, Peraish. He says, very interesting. He says, because they say Nimonavsha. If there's some problem with your testimony, he's free. And if your testimony is crystal clear, then what's going to happen? Everybody's going to paskin he's chayiv misa. We know if everyone paskins that he's chayiv misa, he's automatically exonerated. And I want to tell you a beautiful word about that halacha, that if all the dayanim paskin that he's chayiv misa, automatically he's exonerated. So that's what you tell him. You tell him midivreichem nizdaka ploini, so that would calm him down. Abaye v'Rabbi Amar Tebayu, they had a different shot of how they started deliberations. Amrinulei, Eloi Kaptas Loi Titchol. You know what? They told the Baldan, yes, there was a terrible, terrible testimony against you. But if you're innocent, you have nothing to worry about. So that's how they're Mahapat B'schusay. Tom Sandel once told me that he had a friend, a Skver Chusid, who was on trial for some terrible, terrible fraud. So he went to the Skver Rebbe and he asked him for a brucha. So the Skver Rebbe says, Rabbi Yid hat gunish zu sorgen, honish kamoide, the emes hat rauskommen. So the Chus said, Rebbe, chatz v'shulum, the emes soll nicht rauskommen. So they told him, Eloi kadas lo titl, you have nothing to worry about. Rav Ashi Amar, call me shirdei lo schus. They make an announcement after the Eidim speak. If anybody has something that could possibly exonerate this guy, Yavoi v'yilmud alav, he should come and share it with us. Tanya Kavos Abaye v'Rava. We have a brisa that supports Abaye v'Rava's pshat, that they tell him that if you're innocent, don't worry about it. Rabbi said, it says by a soita, what do they tell her? They first start off with the good side. Then you have nothing to worry about. So Zok the Gemara, Amar Aleph, Mikan, we see from here, Shepoischin bedine nefoshes tchila luschus. The first thing you start with is something luschus. So I just want to share something that Chaim Tzvi shared with me, Chaim Tzvi Lebowitz, a beautiful shtickle on this halacha, that if all of the 10 dayanim, all the 23 dayanim, find a reason to condemn, we automatically say that he's exonerated. So he said there was a Yid, his name was Rabbi Yosy of Rosenheim, who was a Yid who always tried to he was a shtadlin. He was always trying to help Klal Yisrael, and he always Rabbi Yosy of Rosenheim. He used to always try to help the Eden. And there was once a situation where Torah Shabbat Peh was very often under attack. And what happened was he was very friendly with a famous guy who was involved over there, a big scholar, who also happened to have learned Chumash with Rabbi Vadia Separnim. I don't know how it came to be that he should teach a guy, that Rabbi Vadia Separnim should teach this guy Torah, but he learned with him. So he said, I need you to help me in proving that we do need to rely on Torah. So he said, I'm happy to do that, but before I do that, I actually have a problem. I have a problem, and I don't understand it. So if you can answer me this problem, well, then I will be happy to help be mishtadel for you. So I want to find the pasuk that he asked Rabbi Yosy. He asked him the following question. Let me see if I could find it. I don't remember the pasuk. I have to see it inside, and then I'll remember it. It says it was a very repetitive lashon. So let me see if I can find it. It's a very, very repetitive lashon. That's maybe tzedek tirdoif. That's not a mishpatim. This is a mishpatim. So let me see if I could find it. I'm gonna try to. Let me see if I can find. I'm sorry that I'm delaying over here. I should have prepared this before. I wasn't sure I was going to say that. It's a beautiful, beautiful shtickle. You know what I'm going to do? I have it on my phone. So let me pull it up on my phone. I'll pull it up on my phone and I'll have 100%. Let's see. Here. And she said as follows. Oh, here we go. And Pasuk says, Midvashecha tirchak. Let's see what it says. Midvashecha tirchaka. Midvashecha tirchak, the Pasuk says. And then it says, V'noki v'tzadik al taroi, kiloatik Russia. This Pasuk is like all over the place. Like what is the connection from the first part of the Pasuk to the middle to the second? That's what it is. And I'll tell you who this guy was. This guy was this guy was a guy by the name of Ruchlin. Did anybody ever hear of a guy by the name of Ruchlin? He was a big guy in those days. I guess that was, I don't know even know where it was. But if you look him up, Ruchlin, you'll see he was a big guy in the Goyish Welt, and he learned with his Farnu. Anyway, so that was the question. What does it mean? It's very repetitive. So the Yosy told him the only way you could possibly understand this is if you look at the Gemara, because the Gemara teaches us that a bezdin that unanimously convicts, that automatically is possible. So what happens if there's a dying in a bezdin, and he knows that the evidence is so powerful that everybody's going to convict him, and because of that he'll walk free. And the dying thinks to himself, you know what? I'm going to bedavka say he's innocent because I want to convict him. And if I say he's guilty, it will be unanimous and he'll go free. And how can we let a murderer go free? Zok the pasuk midvar sheker tirchak. It's sheker. It's a davar sheker. And even though you want to make it that he should get killed, you're not allowed to say sheker. You have to vote guilty, even though it's going to exonerate him. V'noki v'tzadik al tarik. You have to follow the Torah, and the Torah says he goes free. So he goes free. Yomai said, bugs you? It bugs you how you talking a murderer going to walk free? Don't worry about it. Kilayat the Rasha. I know what I'm doing. I'll take care of him. If he's a Rasha and he needs to be killed, you have nothing to worry about. I will take care of him. So what happened was when Rabbi Yosy told him this, what was his name again? Rabbi Yosy. When Rabbi Yosy told him this, he said, gewaltig, now not only do I see the Torah geschmack, I see that without Torah Shabbat Peh, mekenach nicht verstehen the Torah, so he was able to be mishtadel on behalf of the Eden that they shouldn't chapter with Torah Shabbat Peh. Okay, Baruch Hashem, we were zoichet to finish Daf Lamed Beis, Leiv, Hearts, and Bisham tomorrow we will learn Daf Lamed Gimel. So tomorrow I'm not going to be here in person, I'll just be saying remotely. And
but it will be available in the shear room.
Okay, Akiva will turn on the stream. Thank you very much for turning it on. And I hope to be back by Tuesday morning. We're expecting a tremendous amount of snow, so I'm not sure if my trips will go as quickly and as smooth as possible, but I'll still say shir remotely wherever I am. I'll pull an Akiva from last week. And I won't be Harristir, but I might be in the Chveis, I might be in
Rochester.
Not in Rochester. What are those Pennsylvania cities along the way? Because I'm going to go through Pennsylvania.
Oh, Scranton and Wilkes-Barre.
We're expecting the snow.
Williamsport, there's going to be snow all over upstate New York and all over upstate Pennsylvania. Like 3 to 7 inches. There's the snow warning from Monday morning at 7 a.m. till Wednesday morning at 11 a.m.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
I'll try to. The Rav told me I should say Parshas V'Yishlach. I'm relying on Ishtay Kagufay, and the Rav said I should put money into Rav Meir and us.
Yosy, where did you remember Rabbi Yosselman from? I forgot.
Rabbi Model.
Oh, Rabbi Model. There was a Marcus Lehman.
Rabbi Model made.
Yeah.